Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. This is Robert Czapkowski, Managing Partner for On Demand Advisors. It's a pleasure to have you here today and joining us. We'd like to share some breakthrough revenue growth innovations that you can apply for your company today in 2021. So today's webinar, what we're going to focus on is discussing and demonstrating how a sales-driven website can accelerate your sales cycle and revenue growth. It's really an exciting innovation that we've created at On Demand Advisors, and we want to share the principles behind a sales-driven website with you, what makes it fully impactful for your company, and also share with you one of our clients where we've actually worked with them to create, collaborate, and implement a sales-driven website for their company. So again, thank you very much. Your participation, involvement in today's webinar is important to us. So as we go through today's webinar, please go ahead and post any questions that you have. I'll make sure that we address them either during the webinar or I'll address them one-on-one with you afterwards if we have too many questions. But I want you to know that every question that you pose today is important to us. We will be recording this webinar, so if you'd like to share this with other colleagues at your company, please do that, because when you get a fantastic idea, like a sales-driven website, you want to share that with other people that could benefit from the same information. Okay, so if we look back at last year, 2020, it was really a challenging year for all businesses. And it was a challenging year, obviously, because of COVID-19. But as you saw with many companies over the period of time that we've been through this whole pandemic, many companies have had to adjust and figure out how they're going to improve their performance, how they're going to still keep their business thriving in a pandemic. And two things that you've seen come to bear. One is e-commerce. So a lot of companies that perhaps were either not e-commerce enabled or fully e-commerce enabled have become so because they realize the value of that channel. Another thing that we've all become used to is Zoom meetings. So we're all Zoomies. And so we all run from one meeting to another meeting as we continue to work with our customers and our partners. So these are really some important aspects that we see. We created the sales-driven website several years ago. And the objective of the sales-driven website is really to help take your buyer through the buyer's journey in the most appropriate way possible and to guide them through the process. Secondly, the reason we call it a sales-driven website is because it's really important that the front-end education, the front-end information sharing, all that information that needs to happen with your buyer can be done through your website online. And we'll talk a little bit about that, why that's important later. But needless to say that many of your prospects and buyers are going to your website first when they hear about you, and that's where they're starting their buyer's journey. So that's why this vehicle is so important to your success. One of the things I talk about is what's the most important real estate that your company has. And while some people may say their corporate headquarters or another facility, the truth is your website is the most important real estate that you have online digitally. So making the most of that and making sure that the website does what it needs to do for you and for your company and for your prospects and customers is really important. So we're going to talk about this breakthrough innovation that we call a sales-driven website that we created and how we perfect that over a period of time. But really, it was a great revenue growth driver for our clients and always has been. But now I think more so than ever because of the economy, what's happened, it's become an imperative for all companies out there. One of the things I'm going to share with you today is that when Craig and I first got together, I was the CEO and Craig was the CMO at Intact. Intact is a software as a service company, a leader in financial accounting solutions. And we partnered with Salesforce, with Mark Benioff and his company going to market. One of the things that we found that was interesting, though, as we looked at providing our financial applications to chief financial officers, is we wondered if we could do this online. So initially, we hired the best sales executives in the world that had sold financial applications to CFOs. And that was quite successful. And then we built an inside sales team to do the same thing. And we wanted to make sure that we were getting coverage in all aspects of the market. And that was successful. And then next, we decided we wanted to make sure that we were working with a lot of partners in a embedded or private label program, and that was extremely successful. One of the things that I looked at with the management team was, could we actually provide a fully buyer-guided website to take our buyers by persona, such as a CFO, controller, user, through the buyer's journey on the website? And so at the time, we didn't think that was possible, that we could actually complete that process. But we challenged the team to do it anyway. So we built at that time, a sales-driven website, and we launched it. And lo and behold, after we had launched the site and looked at all our multi-channel approach, we found that 20% of our sales were coming through the self-service sales-driven website. So even though we had this precept that a CFO would not buy a solution like that online without a consultative selling approach, we found that sometimes our belief system wasn't up to speed. So we had to change our beliefs to coincide with what people are doing today. So we look forward to sharing this journey with you today. We look forward to you being able to apply these 8 principles to your business in 2021. A bit of background, both myself and Craig Remy co-founded On Demand Advisors 12 years ago, and we are truly a revenue acceleration agency. So we worked and have worked with hundreds of B2B companies to actually help them scale their revenue growth and do it so it's predictable, capital efficient, and consistent. So I've been CEO for both public and private companies. Craig has been CMO for both private companies. So the main takeaway from this, I think, is number one, is that we've been operators like yourself. So we built companies, successful companies at different stages. And secondly, since we work with hundreds of B2B companies, we bring a lot of serial best practices to the table in terms of revenue growth that we're going to be sharing with you today and have been sharing over the past 12 years. Just to provide a foundation or grounding for everybody, we talk about the revenue acceleration map. And what is the map? Well, I think we all look for a map, whether it's on our GPS system or whether we're looking at going to a vacation or a journey. We all are looking for a map in terms of what's the most efficient, best way for us to get from A to B. And so we created the revenue acceleration map. And we're going to share that with everybody as we go through the process today. Okay, so let me go ahead and share you visually what this map looks like, because we want to make sure that it represents the best practices available in the marketplace today. The other thing about the map is that Craig and I have updated the map along with our team every year for the past 12 years. So it not only represents best practices in terms of revenue growth, but it also represents our best thinking based upon real life experiences. And this is the map. And in our next webinar that we have in 2 weeks, we'll talk about how do you engineer your revenue growth for 2021. And we'll be talking specifically about how you apply this map to your business. Today, though, we're going to focus on, in number 4 under marketing and number 6 under sales, we're going to focus on the sales-driven website. Now, the reason why the sales-driven website is on this map twice is because in most cases, when you're looking at your website and revamping your website or updating it, the budget typically falls in marketing. So the objective is to get prospects and customers and partners to come to your website and to educate them, convert them into becoming market qualified leads. We also believe, though, that a sales-driven website should actually help your sales process. So the reason why we have it over here is because one of the purposes of a sales-driven website is to help also graduate your market qualified lead into a sales qualified lead. And that's really important because in the B2B space, only 1 out of 10 market qualified leads are typically sales ready. That means 9 out of 10 are not. So you got to have the right tools for the sales team and the right information for your champion to help bring them along so that they become a true sales opportunity for your company and they become eventually a customer. So this is the map, and as you look at the orientation, in the purple is strategic revenue engineering for marketing, lead development, and sales in these 3 funnels. We've got strategic insights that are really important. We've talked about in prior webinars about market intelligence and buyer intelligence and how that's important for you to truly understand your buyer, what's important to them. In the red is marketing, sales is in yellow, and of course, partners, partnerships, and upsell, cross-sell is really important in number 7. But anyway, that gives you an orientation to the map, but we'll be talking specifically today about the sales-driven website. So as we go throughout today's webinar, we also want to get your input. So let me go ahead and execute this or launch this first poll if we could. And let's get an understanding from your perspective, how would you characterize your current company website that you have today? So number 1, you may be saying, well, gee, we need to do an overhaul of the website to evolve it. You may feel that it provides good information about your products and services. It may guide visitors through your offerings, which would be great. It could enable the buyer's journey for appropriate visitors. And then finally, if you're really fortunate, it may do the full evaluation and buyer sales journey on the website itself. So go ahead, if you could, and take a few moments and just give us your estimate about where you're at today. And we'll share that with the audience. But we'd love to make this as interactive as possible as we go through this together. So I'll just keep this open for a couple more seconds here. Go ahead and if you could, give us your input. We'd really appreciate it. Okay, so let me go ahead and close this, and I'll share this with everybody today. So for the poll results, 21% stated that your website needs an overhaul. 43%, the number 1 area, is that it provides information about your products and services, which is great. 21% stated that it guides your visitors through your offerings. 13% stated that it enables the buyer's journey, appropriate for each audience. And then 1%, it does the entire thing and it does the sale online, which is fantastic. Now, one of the questions that we get asked often is, gee, our prospects are not going to buy online. And so the purpose of the sales-driven website is to take your buyer through the buyer's journey as far as they can. So if you're selling SAP, you're not going to complete the sale online, as an example. Or if you're selling a very strategic service, that's going to be highly consultative and require a lot of hand-holding with your prospects. So that's truly understood. But the question really gets down to is, how far can you take your buyer on the buyer's journey on the website? And so even if you are an enterprise-focused company today, there may be offerings, for instance, that may be transactional. You may have service offerings. You may have upsell, cross-sell offerings. You may have a lot of different things that can be provided through a sales-driven website that not only do all the education and preference setting, but also take somebody through that entire process. So just wanted to share that with you because we often get involved with microsites where we'll have a corporate site for a company, but we'll also set up microsites for their services group or a microsite for additional upsell, cross-sell solutions that they're offering their customers and so forth. So thank you very much. Let's go ahead and continue with our webinar today. One of the important takeaways as we look at today's buyer, look at your buyer, is that according to CSO Insights, 70% of the B2B buyers fully define their needs before engaging with the sales representative. And almost half identify specific solutions before reaching out. So the website becomes pivotal in terms of engaging your audience today. And here is something from both Gartner and Forrester, two analyst research companies. And of course, they predict that 80% of the buying process will occur today without any direct human-to-human interaction. And that's really amazing when you think about it. But it's amazing from that perspective, but it's not so amazing in terms of your own personal situation, because if you're like me, I do a tremendous amount of research online. I also do a tremendous amount of buying online. And in many cases, it doesn't involve talking to somebody about what I'm going to end up doing. So anyway, that's ingrained with us, especially in the B2C, where we may be doing a lot of ordering on Amazon, or we may be going to Carvana or other things where we're actually doing all of the work online. Okay. So here's the challenge with most websites. And what I've asked you to do today, as we're going through today's webinar, is bring up your website. So go ahead, bring up your website so we can toggle back and forth. And as we go through these 8 best practices we're going to talk about today, let's talk about how you think that they apply in terms of your website that you have today. So most websites today, if they're updated, do offer great scrollability on smartphones, but most of them are informational. Most of them also provide what I call seller-based information instead of buyer-based information. So seller-based information would be information about your products, your services, your management team. Those type of things would be very important. A lot of times, though, a buyer is looking for something different. Your buyer is looking for, how do you address my need? How do you address my business challenges? How do you address that? Who are companies just like me that you're helping to achieve their success? So sometimes the buyer has a different perspective. So it's always important to get their perspective. Many of the websites today don't anticipate the needs of the buyer, and many of them actually cause friction. So one of the things we'll be talking about today is a frictionless experience, which is eliminate the friction in the buyer's journey. So if I go to your website today and there's a button that says, sign up here for a demonstration, or sign here and we'll have somebody call you back. What does that do? Does that increase friction or reduce friction? The truth is it increases friction. And so what ends up happening is you have somebody that comes to your website, they're looking for certain things, perhaps they want them demonstrated immediately with them. And so if they don't get that satisfaction, then they leave basically on the bottom here, unsatisfied. And finally, a lot of the websites out there don't convert visitors into prospects. So if you get 5,000 or 10,000 visitors to your website every month, the question is, how many of those are converted through your website into be true prospects? In other words, they've spent a lot of time on your website, they understand your solutions, and they really have fully digested everything that you can do before they move to the next step. So the purpose of a sales-driven website is to really do these things. Number one is to guide your buyer through the buying process. The second thing, which is really important, is to provide meaningful content, education, and offers. And that's really coupled with the third area, which is increasing the quality of your sales leads. So for instance, one of our customers is a company called ICUC. They are a global social media management services company, and they work with companies like Starbucks and Novartis and many Fortune 1000 companies. What we found working with their prospects and with their customers is that if I'm Starbucks, what's meaningful content for you to give to me is tell me what's happening with social media with food and beverage companies, because that's what I'm in. So what we found is that we needed to create the buyer's journey based upon industry. As we worked with ICUC, that became important because the way their audience self-identified was by industry. So the next thing is to convert visitors into prospects. So if somebody comes to your website, the question really gets down to is how do you convert them to the next step? And so we're going to talk about having meaningful offers. So offers such as buyer's guide, offers such as a ROI guide, offers such as a best practices infographic of the to-be process. These are great offers for your audience. A sales-driven website also should accelerate your sales cycle. It should do all the front-end education that typically is done in the one-to-one sales environment. And so by the time a sales executive is working together with that prospect or with that buyer or prospect should be educated. They should be up to speed as far as your solutions and value propositions. And they should really be able to ask intelligent questions, and you should be able to take them to the next step. And then finally, coincide with this is reducing your cost of sales. You know, remember when I was talking about at Intact, one of the things that we found is that we are a subscription software company, so a software as a service company. Well, many of you today may have moved to the SaaS model, and you may have moved to streaming your services or your solutions on a cash flow basis over a period of time. That makes profitability more challenging. So it's important that you can do this with velocity. It's important that you can do this effectively. And so that's another thing that we talk about with the sales-driven website is being able to do this as effectively as possible. Now what I'd like to do is walk you through the 8 best practices that we applied when we actually transform an informational into a sales-driven website. And then we'll walk you through an example too. The first is projecting branding power and energy. And we're going to talk about one of our customers today. The company is Technical Toolboxes, headquartered in Houston, Texas, and they're a provider of software solutions for engineers in the pipeline industry. So they do upstream, they do downstream, but their main focus has always been midstream. And so one of the things that we did as we created their website for them is we wanted to make sure that we could truly resonate with the audience. So here's their website, and I just wanted to share this with you. When you come to the website, and I'll just restart it, you can see that number one is we're creating action, we're creating involvement, we're identifying with their audience. We're also setting the stage as far as them being the productivity standard for engineers in the oil and gas industry. And so it's important in terms of how we structure their buyer-driven website that we can start off first with strength of message, strength of brand, and also to do this in a visually stimulating and engaging way. Okay. So that's number one. Number two is enabling buyer self-selection. So what does that mean? So when somebody comes to your website, how do they self-select? So how do they view themselves? So if somebody came to Intact's website, we were going to have them select by persona. I'm a CFO, Chief Financial Officer. I'm perhaps a controller. I am a accounts payable clerk. I am a user of the financial systems. I could be a board member, and so forth. And so what we wanted to do is provide a buyer's journey by persona. We also may be looking for certain types of solutions. So one of the things that we're going to look at with Technical Toolboxes is many of their engineers are looking for certain solutions. So we wanted to provide the ability for you to drop in and say, I want to look at this solution. We talked about ICUC and how we worked with them to look at the 12 top industries or verticals that were important to them. Another criterion may be by specialty. So we worked with organizations that provide EHR, EMR solutions to the healthcare industry, to physicians, physician practices. And so in their situation, by specialty became very important. So if I'm a cardiologist, I want to find out how does your solution, your EMR solution, work with cardiology centers, not just working with GPs in general. By geography, you may have set buyer selection up by geography. So if I'm in South America, obviously there's certain criteria that will be important for me to self-select versus if I'm in EMEA or I'm in Asia Pac. And you can have other criteria. So on the Technical Toolboxes website, what was important is we gave them the ability to actually look at self-selection by either solution or by role. So for instance, their audience is truly engineers. So if you think about engineers in general, I could navigate a couple different ways, but just here on the home page, here are some of their solutions that they offer. But I may say, you know, I want to look at choosing what I do by role. So instead, what I want to do is come in here and say, I'm a corrosion management engineer. And so give me the information that's relevant to me as a corrosion management engineer. I really don't care what else you're doing for design engineers or integrity engineers or other types of engineers. Walk me through what's important to me. And so this is really giving relevant content to your target audience. Okay. The third area we want to talk about is enabling the buyer's journey. So this is a prescriptive path to guide the buyer through the journey that they're looking for. Give them the education and the information that they want as they're starting the evaluation process. One of the most important things that we find with a sales-driven website is to begin with the buyer's need or business challenge. I would say in 100% of the websites that I see today, they don't begin there. They actually begin with somebody's service. We provide this great service. We provide this great product. And they start with the solution, not with the problem. Most people, when they're looking for something, they're starting with the need. So what we wanted to do here was start with where the buyer is, start with the need. We also want to eliminate time-consuming steps. So for instance, if someone is typically looking for a demonstration of your solution, why not do a recorded demonstration or a video and include that in the buyer's journey to give that information to them? Or if you know you're going to get the same 20 questions every time in every sales cycle, why not provide an FAQ that addresses those proactively? One last thing before we step in and look at a buyer's journey on Technical Toolbox's website is the buyer's journey can also be for your partners. So in many cases, we think of the buyer's journey set up for prospects or customers, but the buyer's journey could be for partners. So a partner, if I came to your company and I'm thinking about, gee, I'm in the oil and gas industry and I'd like to come to Technical Toolboxes and see what you do as far as working with partners like me, you could take them down the buyer's journey and let them self-select and say, I'm a partner. I'm not looking to be a referral partner. Maybe I'm looking to be a reseller. Maybe I'm looking to be a private label or embedded partner. So you can take them down different paths and share with them how they can be successful with your company. And that's fantastic when you have the buyer's journey. So again, let's just go back to the website. And for the corrosion engineer, you can see what we have here is we've established the buyer's journey for them. We started off with what are the challenges that a corrosion engineer typically has? What are the solutions that Technical Toolbox provides? What's frequently asked questions that are asked in every case? And who are customers just like us that are using your solutions today? And finally, we can talk about next steps. So some of the next steps we're going to talk about in the next area is what are meaningful next steps? Well, requesting a demonstration may be important. Seeing a customer story for somebody just like me, perhaps a buyer's guide. I don't know how to buy a solution like this, so perhaps you can tell me as a corrosion engineer, how should I go about thinking about how to buy these type of solutions that I'm going to need to get my job done? So let's go back to our PowerPoint and go to this next area. So educating and developing your leads. This is where we talked about converting leads into opportunities. So if we can provide extraordinary solutions to get people to come to the website, the question now is when somebody is involved with your website, how do we actually help convert them into an opportunity? And so you start thinking about what's important to your champion, what's important that you need to provide from a sales perspective. And so these are some of the things that we actually create for many clients. One is called a buyer's guide. Another one is how do I cost justify this, an ROI justification guide, an FAQ, a process infographic. So how do you optimize my process? If you provide accounts payable and paperless invoicing, e-payment solutions to me, how do you optimize my organization? How do you optimize my company? It may include recorded demonstrations or presentations, and it may include industry or customer success stories. So let me give you an example of what some of those would look like, for instance. So for instance, if we just go back and look at technical toolboxes, if I'm an API inspector, in other words, I'm inspecting the pipelines, I'm looking for perhaps how to buy the API inspector's toolbox. So now you're going to take me through this ebook that's going to help educate me and provide the information I'm looking for. I may be looking for who else in the industry is using the API inspector's toolbox and provide me success stories so I understand how it's being used by other companies and how they're benefiting from it. Another example would be an ROI guide. Gee, you provide a pipeline toolbox, that's great. How do I cost justify this? So give me some success stories, give me the information I'm going to need to create the ROI that I need for my company. So this is some examples I'd like to share with you in terms of things that we actually end up including and creating for our clients to actually help them be more successful with their audience. So that's all about educating and developing your leads. The fifth area of a sales-driven website is connecting your website to a marketing automation system. And we put in just about every marketing automation system out there, including with best practices. So the ability to score and grade your prospects and to understand their behavior when they're on your website is really important. As you migrate to a buyer's journey driven website, such as we're talking about today, you can see what they're doing on your website. You can see the offers they're actually taking and requesting from you. All of that gets scored and graded. That's just amazing to that. So if you're using a system like Pardot, for instance, and you're Charles Pooley, you can see that we can score and grade Charles as he comes to the website. So we can give him a score based upon his behavior on the website. We can also give him a grade based upon how interested we are, based upon his title, his industry, or other criteria that we deem it to be attractive. The sixth area we like to talk about with a sales-driven website is reducing your cost of sales. So we talked about sales velocity. Sales velocity is just really, really important because we've worked with many companies, many of them, let's say SaaS companies, for instance, where their CAC or cost of acquisition is really out of the norm. And so what we had to do is really look at how do we provide velocity to their sales process. One of the ways that we do that is with the sales-driven website. The second thing about a sales-driven website is making the first impression. If you're like me, when you're going to a company and you're seeing the website for the first time, it's like meeting somebody for the first time. You have this opportunity to make the right first impression, and you never get that chance again. So this website really gives you an opportunity to do that. Now, according to the Corporate Executive Board, 57% of the sales process is already completed before your prospect engages with a sales executive. So reducing your cost of sales, but also offering a frictionless buying experience becomes really important. Now, number 7 of these principles in a sales-driven website is to automate the success that you have with your sales executives. So for instance, one of the companies we work with up in Philadelphia, the chief executive officer said, Bob, my problem isn't the people I get in front of. My problem is the people that I'm not in front of, that are not in the room or traveling. I need to have the same experience for them when they hear about my meeting so that they can go to our website and have that same information. So a sales-driven website gives you the opportunity to really mimic your best salespeople and provide the information and provide the information the buyer wants in a consistent way. So this gives you an opportunity, especially when you think about the enterprise, of all the influencers, all the decision makers, all the different stakeholders that can be involved in your process, and how do you actually provide a consistent, rich, interactive experience with them. And then finally, this may or may not apply to you, but completing the sale online is important. And so there are a number of innovations that we've added to the sales-driven website. Not only that we can take the order and take the payment on the website, if that's something that someone wants to do, but we also created something else we call accelerated contracting option. And what that allows us to do is help you eliminate 90% of the contract negotiation process. So we've been very good at implementing that. It's something that we've created, another revenue growth innovation. But often what we find when you're selling to the enterprise is things get stuck in legal. And so consequently, somebody is looking at your 50-page SLA and agreement, and they're looking at how they're going to pull it apart and take 3 months to negotiate with you. So this is the 8 principles we talk about of applied to the sales-driven website. So number 1, your sales-driven website should convey energy, branding power to your target audience. Number 2, it should enable your audience to self-select. Let them self-select based upon what's important to them. Is it their industry? Is it their position or persona or title? Is it based upon some other criteria that's important to them as far as the type of solution they're looking for? The third area is enabling the buyer's journey as they've self-selected. The fourth is educating and developing your leads, and to allow that to happen on the website. So you give the right information that's relevant to your target audience. This gives you the opportunity now to prioritize the leads based upon scoring and grading that we talked about. It also gives you an opportunity to reduce your cost of sales and present both a consistent experience offline and online to your prospects. And finally, to complete the sale. So that's some of the major information we wanted to share with you today. At this stage now, I'd like to do a number of things, talk about next steps, but I also want to get your opinion again on what you've been able to ascertain from today's webinar. Give us your response if you could. So what actions will you take from today's webinar? Number 1, you could say, hey, this is great information. I need to think about it. Number 2, you may say, you know, we really need to understand our buyers a lot better so we can understand how to relate to them and have a better understanding of them. The third thing that you may say is we need to model the buyer's journey to guide our audience through the buyer's journey as they come to our website. The fourth you may say is we need a better way to convert visitors into prospects. And finally, you could say, well, we need everything that a sales-driven website includes that Bob's talked about today. So go ahead if you could and just weigh in, give us your opinion on the information that we shared with you today, because it's all, like I said, very valuable to us. Okay, I'll just keep this open for another second or two. And we're going to be opening this up for Q&A. So we appreciate your questions and keep them coming as we go to the next step here. Let me go ahead and close the poll and share the results with everyone. Okay, 25% stated that we provided some really good information, and you can think about this and think about what's meaningful. 9% stated you'd like to have a buyer intelligence to better understand your target audience. And by the way, about 2 months ago, we had a buyer intelligence webinar to talk about how do you gain that true insight into getting in the head of 50 or 100 decision makers in your target audience to understand what's important to them. So we're happy to provide you that, or a recording or a conversation. 27% stated that you need to have the ability to model the buyer's journey to guide your buyer through the appropriate journey for them. 18% stated that you need better ways to convert visitors into prospects, which is really having the key offers that we talked about. And then 20% stated that you need a sales-driven website that includes all of the above. So that's fantastic input. Thank you for that. Okay. So what we'd like to do now is open this up for questions for Craig and I and for our team, and happy to address any questions that you have. So please go ahead and post them. And let me go ahead and look at some of the questions here, and we'll take as many as we can. This question is from Joseph. Joseph says, what's the time that it takes to convert from an informational to a sales-driven website? Good question. Thanks, Joseph, for that question. I would say it typically is about a quarter to go through the process. So we have a very structured process. And why don't I have Craig kind of walk you through some of those steps? Craig?
Sure. So thank you very much for the question. So we're looking at approximately 8 to 12 weeks. It really depends on the complexity of your sales process, as well as the complexity of the different verticals that you are targeting. But we're able to, in every instance, get you up and running in about 12 weeks. And that goes from really identifying what you're trying to achieve from a sales perspective on the website, as well as identifying the branding that you're doing, as whether it's existing or whether we're building new for you, and then fully putting the buyer-driven process and all its automated steps in place.
Good, thanks, Craig. Here's a question that we received. 70% of the buyers fully define their needs before engaging with sales. Does that include or apply to services companies as well? It's a great question, and thanks for that question, because I think it really depends on what we found is, does the buyer understand what they're looking for? So for instance, I've been at some companies, I would call them evangelical companies. And in those cases, the buyer didn't even know that they needed us. So there was no way that they could actually truly understand what was possible, because they didn't know that these solutions existed. So back in the day, I was at a CRM company when people didn't know what CRM was. Of course, Gartner coined that phrase, and many companies were very successful bringing their CRM solutions to market, like Salesforce. So, Craig, do you have any input on that question?
No, I think that the key thing is we're living in a different world here, and especially with COVID, the whole migration of what we have to do on the websites is so dramatically shifting. Even in the last 6 months, I've been shocked. While we have long here in Silicon Valley lived in a virtual remote world, where we were still somewhat shocked that so many people were struggling to shift online. And that shift, even in 6 months from now, when we shift back or companies shift back, there's going to be a residual effect, and there's going to be an expectation that everything's going to be going. And I'd say that number is not going to be 70%. I think it's going to be 85, 90% in at the end of next year. So I think that the residual benefit of this COVID is going to reduce the cost of sale, but it's also going to put other burdens in other parts of your company. And it's right now is a perfect time for you to be retooling and thinking about how to really put that in place for 2021.
Good. Thank you very much for that answer. Here's a question from Daniel. Daniel said, how do you determine how buyers self-select? Can you reliably do this with a survey? So let me share what my thoughts are. The answer is yes, Daniel. Hey, Craig, I'm getting a little feedback. Can you mute just for a second? So what I look at it with your question is, when we go through the the buyer intelligence survey with the target audience, it typically is, let's say, 30 questions that we're going to ask 50 plus decision makers. And so one of the questions really is, how do they see themselves? What's relevant to their perspective? When we did the survey with ICUC, we did a horizontal survey first. But through the initial survey, we found, as we did that across the audience, that they really saw themselves looking at information through the lens of an industry or a vertical. So they really wanted to drill into what ICUC could do for them as a food and beverage, a CPG, a pharmaceutical company, a healthcare company, and so forth. So it's a great way to do that, and great question for you to ask in terms of what we're doing here today. Here's the next question. For self-selection on the website, is the best way to figure that out by using forms? How do you know, how do we know on our side what is their persona or what they're located unless we ask them in the form? So I guess the question really is, how do you know who's coming to your website, and how do you gather that information? Craig, you want to take a stab at that, and then I'll add mine.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a great question, and it's going to get to a bigger question related to marketing, and it's about your proactive marketing versus your reactive marketing, and it really depends on the size of your market, what you're going after, and maturity of your marketing. So if we're talking about reactive marketing, where people are visiting your website, that is an instance where you will have to ask for additional information in some of those forms, because you don't have that, say, what the role is or the industry and so forth. Then you're going to have to populate your database and whatever the marketing automation system is. Now, you're primarily, though, and this is where there's a difference, you're primarily going to have to get your most of your leads and opportunities from a proactive marketing approach, and that means reaching out to them, and that means building a database and knowing who you're actually reaching out to. By doing that, then you can funnel those particular respondents to different forms, ones that already are have a progressive profiling set up or are already triggering off of the data that you have in your database. So there are really two different approaches, and each need to be incorporated into your strategy.
Thanks, Craig. Thank you very much for that. That's fantastic. Here's the next question. Do you work on a specific platform like WordPress? Is this a turnkey solution? And what about companies working with companies like HubSpot?
I can answer that. So we do primarily work with WordPress because they're, number one, the platform is very flexible, and there are many, many different plugins available that reduces your own cost of development for whether it's event management or whether it's e-commerce. There's many things that are out of the box that can be highly customized for your specific needs. Now, that said, if you're working with HubSpot and you've invested in HubSpot, that's not a problem. We can integrate the HTML into HubSpot and leverage, to some extent, some of the existing plugins that exist. They're just different hurdles that have to be overcome, but it's all doable.
Perfect. Thank you, Craig. Here's another question from our audience. How many personas are too many when designing a journey on a website? What do you think about that, Craig?
Well, you know, it's a great question. I wouldn't go probably more than 12, and that seems like we're probably hitting the upper limit. And then if you really had 12 personas, I'd begin to question if there's some other level of segmentation that needs to be incorporated. And so it'd require a different conversation. I'd have to ask more questions, but I think absolutely it's typical. I'd say companies are within the 6 to 8, and that's completely doable and digestible. When you start going above that, it becomes a list, and then I would encourage us to think in different ways.
Okay, good. Here's just a couple more questions here. I'm interested in number 7, the consistent buying experience between the site and our sales team. And as a discussion with our sales team, where they offer more detailed information, can we provide the information without providing too much information? It's a really good question in terms of balance. And what I find is that one of the real values of a buyer-driven, sales-driven website, when you're taking the buyer through the process on the sales-driven website, is to provide them with relevant information. The challenge with a lot of websites that we see today is that there's too much information. A lot of it's not even relevant for that specific buyer. So what you're doing is you're adding a lot of content, but you're actually degrading the viability and effectiveness of the website. So the more that we can fine-tune the information, specifically relevant content to the buyer and the buyer persona, the more valuable it's going to be in terms of addressing their needs that they have when they're on your website. But great question. Let me take, just time permitting, 2 more questions. And this one is from Danielle. Danielle asked, what's required to begin this journey? So Danielle, one of the things that we do is when we sit down and work with the company is we create what we call the revenue acceleration playbook. And that's one thing that we do first, because when we're thinking about where you want to go, it's all based upon your strategy, based upon where you want to head. So first and foremost, strategy is most important to figure this out. And then secondly, the other things that we're looking for is looking at, before we even think about building a sales-driven website or helping you transform, what's reusable that you have today, what needs to be created, what's the delta, and what's important to your buyer as they're going through the buyer's journey on the website. So that really helps us really, if you will, fill in the dots and really figure out what needs to be done here. One of the questions, the final question I'll take for today is, who performs the work? And so Craig, perhaps you can talk a little bit about when we go through this process with our clients, who actually performs the work and how does it get done?
Yes, absolutely. So number one, Bob and I are the managing partners and Automat Advisors. We are intimately involved with every single client, and we strategize with you upfront what you're trying to achieve from a revenue and penetration standpoint in the markets. And that then trickles down into how we're constructing the strategy for the website, the actual tactics. So myself, being a former creative director, I will be intimately involved with the branding, and Bob will be intimately involved in the sales process. And we will work with you to construct whatever that strategy is. So you have a very unique combination of skill sets when you bring us to the table. And then we'll be managing it with our team to bring it to fruition for it's both in the sandbox and ultimately going live on your own site.
Thanks, Craig. Thanks for your advice on that. Okay, what we'd like to do is talk about next steps. So here's the next steps we'd like to share with you. One is to set up a conversation after today's webinar and just talk about how this sales-driven website program could apply to your company, apply to your where you're at. We're also working with quite a number of companies to actually help them create their 2021 revenue acceleration playbook to really look at the most predictable, capital efficient way for them to get the revenue growth they're looking for this year. And then finally, we've got lots of revenue growth innovations that we talk about every month with you and seeing how they apply to you. Also, you can join us at one of our upcoming webinars. It's all about transformational growth for your company and for yourself. The next webinar we're going to have is going to be on January the 19th. And we're going to be talking about how do you engineer your revenue growth for 2021. In early February, we're going to talk about how a proactive partner program can drive your revenue growth. So what we find is a lot of companies have partner programs that are not effective. And so they've set up opportunistic programs that are giving them the type of sell-through that they're looking for. So we really help talk through how do you attract the right partners, how do you select them, how do you engage with them to get the results you're looking for. And in mid-February, around the 16th, we're going to talk about accelerating your sales performance. And we're going to talk about a number of ways that you can do that, very demonstrable ways, from a sales playbook to a wisdom platform in terms of having the right information for your sales team at each step of the sales cycle, and talk about how that gets deployed for companies. So these are some great topics that we could talk about. And here is my contact information. Here is Craig's. Obviously, you can visit our website at ondemandadvisors.com. What I'd like to do is thank all of you for attending today's webinar on a Sales Driven website. We hope that you found the information valuable, intuitive, and insightful, and that we can work with you to apply this to help you grow your revenue significantly this year in 2021. So on behalf of myself, Craig, and the entire On Demand Advisors team, we'd like to thank you for joining us for today's webinar. Have a great day.